Shabbat Shalom, this is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries. It is October the 8th, 2016. It's the Shabbat, the Sabbath, between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. It looks like just a few days ago, Zachary Bauer had a debate or discussion, I guess, with the leading vocal proponent of Preterism, Dr. Don Preston, who's based out in Oklahoma. Dr. Don Preston's a full preterist. I'll provide the link to Zachary's discussion / debate. I literally spent about 2 hours watching the whole thing, and the problem with talking with preterists is that it's very hard to pin them down because they go on all these different rabbit trails, and unfortunately, that's kind of what happened with Zachary Bauer's discussion with Dr. Don Preston. But what I wanted to do real quickly is I just wanted to provide two very, very strong scriptural points that I think cut to the heart of why preterism is a false doctrine. And again, for those of you who don't know, preterism basically believes that all the prophecies in Daniel and Revelation were fulfilled by 70 AD. That Yahshua returned, that we're in the new heavens and new earth now, and that all of it can be spiritualized away. The two things that I think are the most powerful arguments against preterism, and they're very, very simple. The first one is in Zechariah chapter 14. Zechariah 14 very clearly describes a time in which all nations of the earth will go up to Jerusalem every year for the Feast of Sukkot. And if they don't go up to Jerusalem to honor Yahshua, then they will be plagued with no rain. And the challenge to the preterists that you have to bring is, show me in history, wherever in history, when this ever occurred. Show me in history where nations did not receive rain, were literally struck with a plague of drought because they didn't come up to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. So that's the very first one, is Zechariah 14. I have yet to hear any preterist be able to refute that and be able to say, oh, it's happened here. You can't really spiritualize away Zechariah 14 because it's very specific in what it outlines has to occur. That has never happened in history, and it will happen, of course, when the millennial kingdom occurs, but it hasn't happened yet, and so preterists can't say that was fulfilled. The other very powerful argument that I think is really, really good is if you go to Acts chapter 1, and Yahshua basically bids farewell to the disciples, tells them to go back to Jerusalem to wait for the Ruach HaKadosh, the Holy Spirit, when the day of Shavuot, Pentecost comes. He rises up they see him physically rise up and go up into the clouds. And the disciples are standing there, sort of continue to look up into the heavens even after Yahshua has disappeared behind the cloud. And all of a sudden, in fact, let me just read it here. This is Acts chapter 1, starting in verse 9. And when he, Yahshua, had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, You men of Galilee, why stand you gazing up into heaven? This same Yahshua, which is taken up from you into heaven, so shall come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. So the angels very, very clearly testify to Peter and the disciples that Yahshua is going to return the exact same way he left. Just as he descended up physically into the clouds, he's going to return. He's going to come back in the clouds. And so, of course, the full preterist says that no, Yahshua returned in a very spiritualized way with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But right here, the angels testify that Yahshua will return physically, just as he left. And so those two scriptures, Zechariah 14 and Acts chapter 1, I think are very, very powerful in cutting right to the heart of the preterists and showing very clearly that this whole idea that all these prophecies in Daniel and Revelation have been fulfilled with the events that occurred in 70 AD shows very clearly that that's just not true. It's completely false. And I found that using those two scriptures prevent you from going into all these different rabbit trails and sort of side arguments that preterists love to kind of drag you into. So I hope this was a blessing for those of you out there. Shabbat Shalom. Yom Kippur is coming up here very, very soon. and we'll be making a special podcast for that. This is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries. Website is spiritandtorah.com. Shabbat Shalom.